We'll call to order a meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission for February the 10th, 2025. At this time, we're going to ask Commissioner Michael Shirley to lead us in our prayer and our Pledge of Allegiance. We ask everyone please stand at this time.
Pray with me, please. Father God, we are so thankful for this day that you've given us. We're thankful to be able to gather together here tonight to conduct the county's business. We ask that you be with each one of us. Help us to make the decisions that are be pleasing to you and beneficial for our county. And watch over us all as we head home tonight afterwards. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
May be seated. Have the roll call and determination of quorum. Madam Secretary.
Jim Aberwater.
Here.
Jeff Phillips.
Present.
Mike Cush.
Present.
Lee Bogle.
Here.
Charlotte P.
Here.
Trey Gooch.
Here.
Jim Thompson.
Here.
Michael Shirley.
Here.
Pattis Reed.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. We'll now have the approval of our minutes, I think from January 27, 2025. I'll ask the Vice Chairman, Lee Bogle, for that.
Thank you. I have reviewed those minutes and they're in good order. Therefore, I'll make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the minutes have been approved. Item 5, public comment period.
Nobody signed up, sir.
Oh, no one that's signed up, so we'll move on. Item 6, items withdrawn or deferred.
No, sir. The one item we have is still on the agenda.
All right, we'll move right in then to new business. This is a rezoning and zoning ordinance amendment request. Just a reminder that all rezoning and regulation amendment requests will be considered at the March 13th, 2025 Board of Commissioners meeting unless deferred or withdrawn by the Planning Commission or applicant. Item 1 is Chris Rudd for Beacon Acquisitions of LLC, RAZ 25002. Location is 8470 and 8478 Amable Road. Commissioner for that district is Joshua James. Size of the site is approximately 39 acres. Tax map 95 and parcels 15, 1501, and 1502. Existing zoning there is residential medium density. Proposed zoning is employment and activity center. Mr. DeMasi.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good evening, everyone. As you stated, the applicant is proposing to rezone this property from residential medium density RM to the employment and activity center zone, which is EAC. According to the submitted application, and this is pretty much word for word from the application they submitted, they'd like to construct 3 buildings for distribution and warehousing with a variety of vehicular and truck parking for use by the building tenants. Each building will contain some amount of office space as well. However, specific uses have not been identified at this time. You will see a concept plan, which is actually in your agenda packets, but also there's a revised one here on the screen as well, a little bit more refined than what's in the agenda packets, but fairly similar. You'll see that the concept plan does show 3 buildings, approximate building area of a little over 430,000 square feet. This is not a planned development, so this is not a binding plan, but it does give you an idea of the type of development that they would like to do on this property. The concept plan does show 2 access points along Almaville Road. You can kind of see one there at the intersection with Shores Road, and then one a little bit further to the south. Since the time that this application has been made, staff has had a meeting with TDOT regarding access to this property. They weren't, I'll just say, they really didn't like the access being as close to the interchange as it is with that one that lines up with Shores Road. So they have asked that any development would look at the possibility of shifting that. They would also have to verify the location of the end of TDOT's access area. Basically, you couldn't put any kind of an access drive there. They have to identify just where the right-of-way for the interstate actually ends. But they do want to see the access moved away from the ramp. So the current access that they're showing on here would have to shift. Now, again, this is conceptual. This is not a plan. If this is approved, you're not approving the plan. You're simply approving the zoning to that particular piece of property or properties in this case. Buffering in the EAC zone is determined by the type of use proposed. An industrial use like this would require a Type 3 buffer against any residentially zoned properties. That would be the property to the west of the subject property and also to the south. So now, of course, along the interstate interchange there and also along Almaville Road, those are frontages along Almaville, so they wouldn't have to do any buffering there. Of course, there's other landscape requirements and things that they have to do as well. But just to give you an idea that buffering would still be required to the south and to the west of this particular property that we're looking at right now. Regarding traffic, just a little bit further, we have talked with the applicant's design engineer. We have done a scoping meeting for a traffic study. That study has not been completed yet. We're still waiting on the executed MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, for that. Reason being, we didn't know necessarily, since we didn't know what the proposed uses were going to be, we had an idea. We didn't think it was necessary to necessarily have it for the rezoning, but however, if this is approved, we would expect to have that at the site plan should this be approved. So just something to be aware of as well. Performance standards, of course, would also have to be adhered to. That's pretty much the extent of our conversation. Sheila, did you have anything further that you wanted to add on this?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is present to also answer questions.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for the staff at this time or comments? Okay, if you do not, we'll ask this time that the applicant would come forward or his representative. Give us your name and other information you'd like to tell us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Matt Taylor from SEC, 850 Middle Tennessee Boulevard. I've also got my client, Mr. Chris Rudd, with me as well. Doug did a good job summarizing. You've got the concept plan. That is generally what we intend to build. I know there will be some fine tuning with both the access and the buffers as we get into this, but in concept, that is what we want to do. And as Doug said, we've already started meeting with TDOT as well as doing our traffic scoping, and so we know those things will have to be done before any formal site plan. We do anticipate some roadway improvements. I think that we're studying the intersection of Almaville as well as both sides of the ramp at 840. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you got.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Taylor?
Beacon Acquisitions, where are they from?
So Chris, his office is over in Nolensville, and he's done a couple of projects here in Rutherford County. Had one out, built one out at Mona near the Speedway on the opposite side, and then he's got a few other properties out there that we're doing some due diligence, soils work, and trying to figure out water at that same location. And then we had a project out on Las Casas Highway. I think we called it Mockingbird Estates. It was a residential development that we did there. Chris has been in Middle Tennessee for many, many years. We've got other projects with him that we're looking at in Winchester or Tullahoma area. He used to have a home building business. He actually sold that a few years ago and has transitioned more into the development side.
Mr. Shirley?
Did you all have, I know you may or may not be required at this point, did you have a neighborhood meeting or get any feedback from neighbors?
We did not. I think my client tried to, because we really just touched just one person kind of to the south, and my client tried to reach out to them a few times. And last week he talked about that. He did not have success hearing back. I think they had done some door knocks and maybe a mailer, but just did not hear back. So.
I'm sorry, but not at this time. We'll have that in public comments here in just a moment.
Already been discussed, but Doug talked so fast maybe I couldn't understand exactly what he was saying, but the general concept of this development is
It's distribution and warehousing. So you can get a variety of users in that, especially with this size building, but just don't know those end tenants. It's hard to go get the final tenants until you have the zoning and some semblance of what you can do. Sometimes there'll be, usually each of these will have 2 or 3 office spaces in there, and those can vary from size depending on that user's need. And then it's not a cross dock setup, so it's really just a one side. That tends to help minimize the trucks to some degree. But there will be trucks. I don't want you to think there won't be trucks.
Other questions? If not, thank you, Matt. We will now go into our public comment period. And at this time, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and have any comments either for or against this. To do so at this time, let you come up here one at a time. You'll notice that there is a device up here on the podium, and it gives you exactly 3 minutes to make your statements. It has a green, yellow, and red light, just like what you'd find out here on Old Fort. The only thing is we don't want anybody running the red light, so we ask that you quit after 3 minutes. So we'll ask the first person who'd like to come forward this time, and I believe somebody's already had a question out here. We ask that you come up here. Give us your name and your address. Just fix that microphone where it best suits you.
I'm Douglas Kerrigan, and my wife Natalia Kerrigan's here in the audience. We lived at the west side of the corner there at 12,000 Franklin Road, and no one has contacted us. First thing we found out was through this letter. And if you ever notice, you go down 840, how you don't see any billboards, because they don't allow you to have any billboards and light pollution on that interstate of 840. It's more a rural area. We like to keep it that way. I object this, what y'all proposing, to upscale a zone in a residential area. I got right at 60 acres that joins that, which is looking directly in my front yard, which I'll have that light pollution. I'll have all the noise pollution. And there's many other places on I-24 you can go and build a warehouse, many places, open lots. And we don't want this to come to our neighborhood. There's a lot of wildlife there that we enjoy, and we know there's going to be a lot of truck traffic, a lot of light pollution, a lot of sound traffic. And I just brought an example that what we would hear probably around the clock, because I own a forklift company, and I'm around logistics, and this is where it really should be proposed. Logistic warehousing, heavy usage, truckage, cars, road noise, lights, sounds, all that in that area. And when you ride down 840, you're going to lose that beauty of the country, that rolling hills that we have now, we've been preserving. And that's why you don't see billboards, because of light pollution. So I brought a little sample that what I would be hearing every day constantly, probably night and day, because I'm in this business, and I just brought you a little, so that for the people might be alarmed by noise, so you might want to cover the ears. So you imagine trying to have a dinner with your wife or go outside and enjoy the outside when you got this going on the whole time. That's just one vehicle. Now, how many trucks are going to be in and out there? Probably several trucks. So now you have this going on all the time, and that's the last thing we want to have looking in our front yard and listen to it. So we've been there 9 years, and I oppose bringing this upscale commercial zone into our area. There's many other places that could be found. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Anyone else like to make a comment? If not, I'm closing the public comment period. Commissioners? Other comments, questions, or a motion? I'll accept either. Mr. Cush.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheila, can you zoom out? I'm trying to get my bearings in my head where there's several other warehouse distribution, I think, along that corridor towards the racetrack, around that Smyrna exit. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You want me to zoom out to like Wilson County?
Well, towards that, yeah, towards those exits that in that direction. Yeah, I'm trying to get in my head how far this is from that big pod of other tilt-up warehouse distribution corridor that's there off of.
Oh, like.
I mean, is it?
It's way out.
So it's
Like,
several-
here's the
it's-
racetrack,
Okay,
and then here's where it starts, where the Wilson County has a lot of the distribution centers. I think that's what you're talking
okay,
about.
so we're 2 or 3 or 4 miles. Okay, gotcha. 10 miles, okay.
Vogel?
Doug or Sheila, do y'all happen to know the one at Sulphur Springs? How far along is that one, and how's that going?
Well, of course, the zoning went through. We also considered the site plans soon after the zoning, so that was about 2 years ago, roughly at this point. The site plans, what was approved, I don't think is what's actually going to be developed out there. We've actually been in conversations with the developer, owner of the property, about making some possible changes to the pattern book. Now, nothing has come forward yet. I think they're in the process of trying to schedule a neighborhood meeting out that way, but nothing's come forward. So at this point, that project's just kind of on hold.
That's the closest one I could think that's similar in scope.
Yes, sir, that would be the closest one. Now, when you go a little further up, like right there, if Sheila were to stop, there at Veterans Parkway, now, of course, you've got a lot of development there. Now, it's predominantly commercial. You do have some residential there. You can kind of see all the lots in that subdivision, but right along the Veterans Parkway there, you've got a lot of commercial there. You've got some institutional type uses, medical facilities and those kind of things. Nothing in the way of any warehouses, at least right there. Now, as you start going further out, again, yeah, that green right there, that's the Sulphur Springs development that you were referring to. And so, of course, as you start getting further out in the county, you don't have as much infrastructure, as far as like at Veterans Parkway, you've got the sewer and everything. You don't have that here. Now, Smyrna is in the process of designing and eventually constructing a sewer that'll come down to the interstate, maybe not go over the interstate at this time, but eventually this part is within their urban growth boundary.
So my other question is, at this particular interchange, we've done a lot of work or a lot of proposed development on the north side of 840. So the west side and the east side are both mainly subdivision or mixed use? Or?
Well, when you look at the map, the zoning map right there, on the north side where you've got that PUD, that was going to be on the west side of Almaville Road, that northwest quadrant. That was going to be some townhome type development. Now, nothing's ever moved forward with that. I think the developer on that is kind of waiting for the sewer to come down there, kind of just holding onto the property right now. On the other side of Almaville Road, you saw some commercial type uses and a mini warehouse facility on the other side of Old Shores, kind of where she had her right there. And then that commercial general along Ocala Road is also going to be a mini warehouse type development. Directly to the south of that, on the other side of 840, you've got that light industrial development that actually just was approved by the commission just late last year. So we've been in some conversations with some folks on a site plan for that, but nothing's been submitted yet. So I would expect that probably sometime this year, based on the conversations we've had for that light industrial property.
So projects in development stage.
Correct.
Well past
Yes, sir.
concept, just not on the ground.
Right, and this whole area here, as I stated in my staff report, this is all identified as a employment area development node in the current plan. Now, that doesn't mean that every single property is going to be zoned to match the node, and of course there is a timing element with these things, but it is identified as a node in our plan, our current plan.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Got a question, Mr. Chairman. How many property owners should we have notified on this? If Mr. Kerrigan didn't get notified, how many did we notify?
Well, I think if I heard him correctly, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, but I think he did get a letter. Now, I don't have the file right in front of me, so I don't know exactly how many notices we sent out. Gail, do you remember about how many there were on that one? I don't think it was just a ton. Okay, because it's 1,000 feet notification is what we do, and there's some pretty big properties in that area, so it's hard to give you a number, but when you've got the interstate right there, that would have taken a lot of it out. I mean, 1,000 feet would have gone to the other side probably, but not much further. But if I remember, like I said, the comments correctly, I think he did get a letter. He just, no one, I don't think, reached out and contacted him. Is that correct? Yeah, okay, he's nodding that was correct.
So in the last, I'm just going by memory, in the last 6, 8 months, we had the Vaughn property over on Ocala that's set up for future mini warehousing. And then over on this side, 840, call it South Side, I think we had Mr. Huddleston in here for a warehousing along Shores Road, because there's a discussion about that bridge. So we've already got 2 projects in this area.
Correct. The mini warehouse, we actually have a site plan for that we're currently reviewing. That'll come before you at some point, probably not this month, but maybe in March or April maybe. But as far as that light industrial property where Sheila has the cursor on it, where the arrow is, yeah, we haven't seen a site plan for that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, do we have, explain he mentioned there's no billboards on 840, and I know there are some restrictions on 840, but that doesn't, explain to me the restrictions on 840, and it does not include development.
Okay. Regarding billboards off-site signage, in our zoning ordinance, the only place where billboards are allowed is along I-24. When we created our sign regulations at that time, we limited it to I-24. At the time, 840 was just a state route. It wasn't an interstate. We just left it as I-24. When 840 became an interstate, we just didn't change the code because we didn't want to see the billboards along 840. And there was no reason to change it because it was already not allowed. Now, there are areas, I believe, that were annexed into the city limits of Murfreesboro. Now, their laws are different than our laws, and I think if you get closer to Veterans Parkway, there might be some there. I can't swear to that, but it seems like we got some calls about that. People were wondering why we're letting billboards be placed. I'm like, well, they're not in our jurisdiction anymore. We can't help that. Now, that all being said, there is a category in our zoning ordinance that's called on-site interstate signage, which would allow a commercially zoned property to have their own signage. Now, it's not as generous, shall we say, for the square footage as you would see for a billboard or something like that, and probably isn't as high, but they do allow for their own on-site signage if it's zoned commercially. So, some of these developments that we've seen, most of these are fronting along Shores Road anyway. I don't know if you're really going to see much of anything, but they do have the ability to at least some amount of their own advertising, not the billboards.
But those codes deal with signage, not development.
Yeah, well, there's a separate chapter in our zoning ordinance that are specific to signage that they go with the zoning of the property. Correct.
Not this area in the comprehensive plan?
Yes, sir, it is. Yes. Yeah, it's identified as an employment area in our current plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few, I hope, easy questions to refresh our memory on some of the regs regarding the amount of buffering on the sides, also the noise and light pollution ordinances. I know those are a particular concern to the neighbor. Maybe you can refresh this particular type of zoning.
Yes, sir. For an industrial style development, what you're looking at is what's called a type 3 buffer between industrial type properties and residentially zoned properties. That's I believe a 50-foot buffer. Now, if they use a solid visual screen like a privacy fence or a wall or something like that, you can cut that down to 25. You still have to put a certain amount of plantings out, but it's not as much as if you just kept it a strictly landscape buffer. Now, you can also use existing plantings on the site. So it would behoove the developer, regardless of who develops this, if it ever develops, to at least maintain a good amount of the existing tree line that's out there. That way they don't have to go back and replant it anyway. So I would expect any design would take that into consideration. Now, as far as lighting And as far as sound are concerned, we do have performance standards in our zoning ordinance, talks about the light levels at the property line, you know, that we require a photometric plan and those kind of things. There's also language in there regarding the noise, you know, decibel levels and readings and things like that. Now, I'll be the first to admit that can be difficult to enforce. You got to make sure you've done it properly and everything, and we've had discussions with that with our codes director about how that would have to work, but those regulations do exist in our zoning ordinance. Did that answer your question?
It does. And are there any regulations on hours of operation?
Not for conventionally zoned property, no, sir.
Mr. Shirley.
In reviewing the plan and listening to staff comments, a few things that really jumped out to me is that this area is already identified on our current plan and is in our draft plan as an activity zone, and it's in line with recently approved rezonings. And is that other purple that's down towards the bottom of the screen, is that a commercial property as well?
Are you talking along Franklin Road? A little, yes, those are both light industrial. No, he's talking
further south,
yes, sir.
that one there.
Right, yes, that is light industrially zoned. That was actually zoned, oh golly, I forget what it was, prior to our ordinance taking effect, our current ordinance taking effect. But when we brought it into the new code, the use that they had proposed on the property was in line with a industrial type classification, so that's where that came from. And then that other one right there on Franklin Road that you see, that's a mini warehouse type development, and I think that's the propane distribution area right next to it.
The fact that TDOT still must approve our driveway connections or road connections with Amityville Road and 840, I think we have an opportunity there to maybe even increase or fix some issues with Shores Road there too. And finally, that the final site plan, like even though we're approving this today, they still have to come back for a final site plan. With those things in mind, I would move for approval.
A motion to approve. Have a second. Have the second. Further discussion. Secretary, call the roll.
Jim Averwater. Yes. Jeff Phillips.
Aye.
Mike Cush. Yes. Lee Bogle. Yes. Charlotte P. Yes. Trey Gooch. No. Jim Thompson. Yes. Michael Shirley.
Yes.
Pettis Reed.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion does carry. Still, we'll remind you that all rezoning regulation amendment requests will be considered at the March 13th, 2025 Board of Commissioners meeting unless deferred or withdrawn by the Planning Commission or the applicant. Moving now to staff reports and other business. Mr. Massey.
I don't have anything further.
Okay, we'll move then to adjournment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we adjourn, Doug, are we planning another study session on Plan Rutherford anytime soon?
We are going to. Now, we haven't set a date yet, but, you know, we're still working through the questions and everything, but we don't have a specific date yet. But we'll definitely be in touch with that before too long.
Commissioners, we also plan for that meeting to also be totally on Plan Rutherford when we do have that meeting. Not a regular meeting date, so we want to remind you of that too. Anything else? If not, we'll adjourn.